fucking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's American Express. Joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is here. Hello, Greg.
Rick, what's going on? Good to be back stateside. Not that I ever left, but good to be back for the PGA Tour. Heading to Palm Springs this week, and I'm always looking forward to this tournament. It's going to be a birdie fest, and I can't wait to break it down.
Well, before we get into anything, let me hit you with some breaking news, Greg, because just moments ago, Xander Schauffele, the favorite to win the American Express, the most expensive golfer in the DraftKings player pool, has just withdrawn from the event, and he has been replaced by first alternate Phillip Knowles.
All right. Well, good news for Phillip Knowles. And I think it's fine in this bracket. You know, Xander was an interesting one for me this week. He's obviously an extremely talented player and would have been playable. But I had some concerns for Xander on this golf course. I think sometimes these birdie fest kind of setups are difficult for the best players in the world, quote unquote. Xander's certainly one of them. But I think it becomes difficult, and you can play really well and finish tied 15th here. So in a way, it makes selecting these players easier because Xander's a really hard guy to fade. So I think it makes our job tonight just a little bit easier.
The format of this event is a little unique. It is played across 3 courses, and Greg, those courses are the Stadium course, which is PGA West, the Stadium course, or you might hear it referred to as the Pete Dye Stadium course, the Nicklaus Tournament course, and La Quinta Country Club. The golfers will play 1 round at each of those 3 golf courses before a 54-hole cut and returning to the Stadium course. So we are firmly entering course rotation season with this week. Where are they next week? Torrey, and then there's one more, right? Oh, Pebble.
Then Pebble, yep. Which, does Pebble still have a rotation?
Oh, because it's a Siggy?
No, it's a Siggy. Is it still? It might only be 1 course.
Yeah, you're right. So this is. I got excited about course rotation season. Let's just focus on the 3 courses that they have here.
Well, we got back to back, so you could call it the season for sure. Yeah, I think these are 3. It's a good mix of 3 golf courses because they're somewhat similar. And what's so fascinating to me is how these are always 3 of the easiest golf courses on the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
Now, if you go play the Pete Dye Stadium course, you're not going to find it very easy. Right. It has been, I find this so funny. Golf Digest ranked like the most difficult public golf courses, and this was one of the most difficult. It might have been, this was a long time ago. It might have been ranked as like the most difficult course in the country.
Yeah. When they built it, it like destroyed those guys, and they were like crying, to their mommies after the round.
Yes. And I think there are a couple of factors why it plays a little bit easier now. One, the players are just better. The players have gotten better. They've gotten longer. They're more dialed in. The areas around the fairways tend to be pretty penal. But this golf course, all 3 of these golf courses, you'll see rough that doesn't look like rough, right? It's browned out. It's completely dormant. So there's almost no rough. The fairways will be green, and then you'll see burnt. Well, it's not burnt; it's dormant Bermuda grass for the rough, and so there's not really a penalty. It makes the golf course a whole lot wider. And the greens, because they're overseeded, all 3 of them are very similar in the green type. It's basically some sort of Tiff Eagle or Tiff Dwarf Bermuda grass that's overseeded with. What is it? Something Ealis. I can't think it. I read it earlier this morning. It's a very common overseed.
Not Poa Trivialis.
Poa Trivialis.
Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Wow.
So
I pulled that from the depths of my brain.
Yeah. Now, what does that mean? Because, you don't know what that grass type is, but it means that there's not a whole lot of grain. They run basically around 11 on the stimp meter. It's a beautiful holing speed. It's a pro-am, so hole locations are typically on the easier side. And for the first 3 days, the hole locations have to be the same on every course. Now, you run around courses, there's not new holes cut every day. So I think they tend to be on the easier side, and this yields a lot of birdies as a result. And that, of course, is because it's a pro-am. You got 156 pros out there and 156 amateurs out there across 3 golf courses, and you want these rounds to get done. So they routinely play as 3 of the easiest golf courses on the PGA Tour. Kapalua may play easier depending on the year, but these are amongst all 3 of them will be amongst the top 5 easiest courses we see on tour this year.
Do you think any part of American Express's sponsorship is because it's the American Express?
No, I don't, but it's very creative and very clever.
Do you think that they should lean into the Express part and this should be a shot clock event?
Yes. But that being said, one, I think that's actually genius. I've never thought of that before. And I'm going to use that. This will not be Express.
No, the opposite.
This will be the opposite of Express. But I'm a proponent of a shot clock every week on the PGA Tour.
There was that one, the DP World Tour did it they had like a one event. They called it the, I can't remember what they called it, but they
put Shot Clock Masters.
Shot Clock Masters. There you go. Just very straightforward. Yeah.
And you know what happened?
What happened?
Pace of play increased.
Oh, shocker. Yeah.
Yes. There were no penalties. There were no shot clock penalties, and rounds were under 4 hours. It's a simple thing.
To put a bow on this, we've got the scoring averages from last year. The Stadium course, the most difficult of the trio, played nearly 3 strokes under par. La Quinta played a touch over 4 strokes under, 4.1 strokes under par. And then the tournament course, just shy of that, 3.92 under par. We've seen, as you mentioned, Greg, winning scores 29, 27, deep into 20 under par. But we've seen kind of a little bit of a mixture of winners here. Plenty of long shots. Nick Dunlap as an amateur, Hudson Swafford, Siwoo Kim, Andrew Landry won this at like 250 to 1. We've seen a couple of higher end players find victory here, like John Rahm. So is this as wide open as the winner history makes it seem?
Yes. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, like I said, the rough being limited is a big factor, but there is still a lot of water. Across the 3 golf courses, you're going to have at least 5 water areas in play. It's somewhere between 5 and 8 across the 3 golf courses. And the way that the bunkering is in some cases, it really does narrow down as you get closer to the hole, especially on the Stadium course. So you lose, like if you think no rough, well, big advantage for the long hitters. They can just bomb away, but you really can't. So you're hitting it into similar positions and you end up with wedges into these greens. Now, as I'm looking at this golf course and doing my analysis, I'm definitely putting a focus on 50 to 125 yards. And it's not that all the shots come from that range, but I just want to know who the best wedge players are. And wedge play, we talk about this a lot with proximity buckets, right? Well, you can hit you're great from 150, but not from 160. Right. Like, that doesn't really hold up. But 50 to 125 is a big enough range where it tells you who the best wedge players are. So I like that stat this week. But the difficult thing about that is everybody's pretty good in that area. Right, everybody can hit a good wedge shot. We mentioned the greens, how there's really no grain in them. They're rolling like pool tables because of the overseed. It's not an extremely difficult task when it comes to the putting. So there's a lot of players that putt well this week. And I think it really opens up the field to a number of players, because the tests that you see in, say, a major championship, or some of the more difficult golf courses on the PGA Tour are much more limited. So I don't think of these 3 golf courses as a specialty kind of setup. And I really do think that opens it up significantly, which I think you'll see in some of the names that at least I dropped tonight.
Well, why wait any longer? We are going to start naming names. We're going to go through this field and discuss the good, the bad, and everything else that we can get our hands on. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
Sail GP is coming to Auckland, New Zealand. The City of Sails will be expecting a performance from the Black Foils and their driver, Peter Burley.
And we're back. Before I get to the players, I have more breaking news. This is just a wild Monday. Things are popping off like crazy. And I have to let everyone know that the deadline to vote in the Sports Podcast Award is tonight. I've been ranting and raving about this for 3 weeks. We have been knocking on doors. We've been running vans to the ballot box. We're getting everybody situated, and this is it. This is the home stretch. Polls are closing at midnight Eastern. So let's have a final charge. Vote us for the best golf podcast. We are looking to get the trophy. We want the trophy. We came up just short last year. We are not going to let it happen again. It will take you 20 seconds to do this for us. It will cost you nothing. It'll cost you nothing. And now this will officially be the last time I ask you to do it. Link is in the description. Josh has tweeted it out. It has been on Instagram. It has been everywhere. If you cannot find it, if you can't find it, we don't want your vote. Don't worry about it. I mean, if I can't help everybody, Greg.
I mean, come on. I'm not even going to ask, right? I've asked for the last time. Okay. You know what to do. Help us out. And if you don't feel it's true, then we don't want your vote either. Hopefully you do feel that way, and hopefully you've already voted.
Vote with your conscience and vote the First Cut Podcast. Have at it. All right. Let's go to my website, rickrungood.com. I've got the cheat sheet locked and loaded, and I did have enough time, Greg. I was able to quickly run the numbers before this podcast, and I got Xander out of this field. So we've got 2 golfers in the $10,000 range. Their names are Justin Thomas and Sungjae Im. I think it would have been a much different conversation if we also had Xander here, but these are the 2 that are going to roll in for this week as the most expensive.
Yes, and at just 10,400 and 10,300, they're playable. I think Justin Thomas is certainly playable this week, and in fact, I really like what I'm seeing out of Justin Thomas. You think about what he's done in his last 3 weeks approaching the green. His last 3 starts, of course, one of them was the Hero World Challenge, but he's gained over 4 strokes in all 3 of them approaching the green. This is Justin Thomas getting back to the Justin Thomas of old. We've been saying this for 3 weeks in a row now. This is a test that's going to really put an emphasis on his wedge play. And if you look in that 50 to 125 area, there's only one player in this field who's better than Justin Thomas from 50 to 125. Now, I used Rick on rickrungood.com, this stats page in the Holy Grail. That is last year and this year.
Correct.
So it's a pretty wide range. You get a really good sample size here. And Justin Thomas is 4th on the PGA Tour, 2nd in this field in that range, one of the best wedge players out on the PGA Tour. And that's why, although he has a limited record here, I believe that's why it's pretty darn good. Tied 3rd last year. The time before that, he played in 2015, tied 7th, and he missed the cut in 2014. Before much of the golf world even knew who Justin Thomas was. So this is a great spot for him.
The other one is Sungjae Im, and I agree with a lot of the sentiment that you have about Justin Thomas. He's going to give himself plenty of opportunities. I think the concerns around JT are the concerns that we've always had in his career, and he's had a hell of a career not being able to putt. Now, this guy can putt. Sungjae Im can putt, and he's starting to put together a really strong run of events here that date back to the playoffs with the T11 at the BMW Championship. Getting into the fall portion of the schedule, he finished T13 at the Zozo, right about middle of the pack at the Hero. And then what we saw at the Century was a really good driving week, a really well-rounded week in general. He ended up finishing in solo third there. So if you could only roster one of these guys, is it JT over Sungjae?
Oh, Sungjae makes it really tough because now, so we know that Sungjae is in good form. JT is in good form as well. But you look at Sungjae's record here, and it's much more extensive. He's played 6 times to JT's 3, and all of them since 2019. So he plays here he's played here every year, and he's never finished outside the top 25. That's impressive in a contest like this, where birdies are flying all over the place. And what rings in my mind is last year at the Century, Sungjae made 34 birdies. He set a PGA Tour record. And he came in third at the Century this year, where he had to make a ton of birdies. I don't know exactly how many he made, but I know that it was a lot. So Sungjae will feast on birdie fests. And it's a great spot for him. It's a great setup for him. I love the way that he's playing. I would say on a very narrow margin, I would take Justin Thomas over Sungjae Im. Just $100 more. If Justin Thomas was at 11,000 and Sungjae was at 10.3, I think I would take Sungjae. But for just $100 more, I can get JT. I've had a feeling he's going to break through and win for a long time. I would lean slightly to JT, but it's slight.
I think I lean slightly towards Sungjae, but again, we're splitting hairs here. The other thing that I remember as you were going through that one of the victories that Sungjae has was Summerlin was at Shriners, and he went like 25 or 26 under par that week. So you're right. He little desert golf birdie fest. Go out and have it. You probably can't go wrong with either one of these, but we've got to start making some more difficult decisions in the 9K range. There's 8 golfers here: Sam Burns, Patrick Cantlay, who any other year would be like $11,000 in this field, Tony Finau, Wyndham Clark, Tom Kim, Max Grazerman. Then we rounded out with Siwoo and Cameron Young. Very interesting. I mean, Finau and Cantlay are probably lower priced than you would expect. Grazerman and Siwoo are rocking the 9K range. Probably something we weren't expecting this time last year. This is just a fun little spot.
If this was next Monday and we spent the day before Sunday talking about any of these guys winning, I don't think it would be a surprise. Right? You wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Cantlay won. I don't think he's going to, but he could win any week. The same goes for Wyndham and Tom Kim and Grazerman and Siwoo, and Cam Young might be. To call it a surprise would be the wrong word, right? You would be happy that he finally broke through, but it wouldn't be a surprise. So the point is, all of these guys are really, really good. They're really good players. The question is, how are you going to fill your lineup? And so Patrick Cantlay and Tony Finau, who you mentioned, I have some questions about. I mean, Patrick Cantlay's play has been fine, but nothing really stellar, nothing really spectacular. Do I think he's going to go make 30 birdies this week? I haven't really seen much evidence of that. So I don't feel particularly strong about his putting. I don't feel particularly strong about any area of his game. I think it's just a guessing game right now with him. So
his best results, I apologize for jumping in there. His best results are on like the more difficult golf courses. You know, the US Open, Harbor Town, I guess to one set, Riviera, Augusta National. These are all his best results, and those do not resemble anything we're going to get this week.
Now, when I think of the American Express, well, Patrick Cantlay for a time had a great record here. He had 3 top 10s in a row, but the last 2 starts tied 26, tied 56. No, it's not. This is not a shoe-in. He loves this place kind of a deal. So I prefer to go $200 more with Sam Burns. Now, Sam Burns probably doesn't fit the category of great wedge player, but where I go with Sam Burns is just a guy that's playing great. And when you look at his finishing positions, they're great. It's all the way back to the playoffs last year, tied 5th, tied 2nd, tied 12th, tied 14th, tied 8th. He's just playing great golf. And as hot as he can get with the putter, and as generally wide lens view how talented he is, I'm very confident with Sam Burns going out there and making 30 birdies this week. 25 birdies.
Sam Burns' record here is 5 trips, 4 made cuts, and all 4 of those are top 18 or better. He's never lost strokes putting here. He rolls it in like crazy. That is, of course, just the stadium course that we have measured data on, but still worth a note that Sam Burns has filled it up in here. I think that's interesting, Greg. And then you look at the bottom of this range, and I think you get some much more volatile options. Wyndham Clark, Tom Kim, Max Grazerman, Siwoo, Cam Young. Maybe Grazerman has been the most consistently good one there, dating back to the midpoint of last year. But these are guys that I would have zero surprise if they won or missed the cut.
Yes. And so I have a hard time with that. I think depending on your total lineup, you could throw Wyndham Clark in there and it would be a good play. You could throw a Tom Kim in there. Although I have some worries about Tom Kim. It just feels like.
Why? Why you worry about Tom Kim? Come on.
It just feels like he's cold. And I know that's crazy because he came in 2nd at the Hero World Challenge, and it just doesn't feel like Tom Kim's clicking on all cylinders.
He was pretty bad at the Sony.
What's your view on him? Because I've had a hard time with it, quite frankly.
Long term, pretty good. I think that he has been. I think he's just been all over the place. I mean, so just look at the results, right? So he goes President's Cup, which the strokes gain metrics are wonky, but he was good. Missed the cut at Shriners, 2nd, missed cut, 2nd. I don't care about the Grant Thornton. It's basically every other event, right? I mean, and dating back to, that goes back even farther to, look at this. Since the Travelers, he's basically alternated top 15s, including a bunch of runner-up finishes or missed cuts. And I think the good part about it is the measured events that we have in that time frame, the approach play has been very solid. I worry about his ability to drive it, and I worry about his ability to putt it. But I also probably overstate the whole birdie fest in the desert, dormant, rough Summerlin comps to these golf courses. I probably overstate that, but obviously Tom Kim has been great at Shriners as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it probably is a good comparison. I just don't like every other. I feel like I'm chasing a pattern because he just finished tied 65th at the US Open. And I'm like, this pattern's going to break at some point, and I don't like where it breaks this week.
I will tell you though. So look at his pattern at the American Express. It's cut T6 cut. So if the pattern were to continue, we are on the good side of the recent form and the good side of the history pattern.
This is the pattern narrative. Double tie. That is crazy.
The double pattern narrative for Tom Kim.
So I would probably pay down for Grazerman or Siwoo Kim over Tom Kim. Okay, now Grazerman, I don't feel like we've had inconsistencies. I feel like he's been very consistent. And I wonder if he is volatile. All we've seen from him is great play and an extremely hot putter, which I don't think he necessarily relies on. He will probably need to have a great putting week in order to get near the top of the leaderboard. But his floor is the highest of these guys. And I like that element. He's playing with confidence. He believes in where he is on the PGA Tour. I think he sees himself being a part of this competitive landscape. And a week like this is a great opportunity to prove it. So I love where we are with Grazerman.
Makes every putt. Just makes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you have to here.
Yeah. Yeah, right up his alley. I'm gonna roll on, Josh. We've got 10 golfers in the 8K range here. They start with Davis Thompson, who's fresh off a missed cut. Harry Hall, who was in the mix and played well for about 68 or 69 holes last week. Kurt Kitayama, JJ Spawn. Oh, close call last week. Nick Dunlap, our defending champion, is $8,500. Then the bottom of this range: Will Zalatoris, Eric Cole, Brian Harmon, Patrick Fishburne, Nick Taylor. So let's see. We've got last week's winner, last year's winner, last week guy who should have won, and a bunch of other guys that might have been in the mix there, Greg.
I'm out on almost all of them.
Okay.
Just by rule. Because this is a good range. It's a really good range. I'm looking at first Harry Hall, who I know you mentioned was in the mix. I believe in what Harry Hall has going on. I know you posted a nice video about him and his short game and his putting prowess. I think that's going to be an asset this week. And I still believe his ball striking is trending in the right direction. So I am going back to Harry Hall this week. Easy click for me at 8,800.
Talk about guys that make anything. And like we covered this on Sunday, but just to recap, he finished 4 shots out of the playoff. On the second 9 on Sunday, he made a bogey, a double, and then he made par on 18, which was the easiest hole. That adds up to 4 shots right there.
Yeah. And the double, he hit a tree and it kicked out of bounds.
Yeah.
It could have kicked back in the fair. You don't know what could have happened. So I love where Harry Hall is with his game. Still trending in the right direction. Nick Dunlap, last year's winner. This is where I said almost out on all of them. I love what he has going on with the putter. Now, he is a little bit of a pattern guy with the putter, like Tom Kim. And I think it's trending in the right direction. But also, if you look at him last year, 50 to 125, 11th on tour, which is inside the top 10 in this field. Really strong wedge player. It's probably part of the reason why he won here last year. But I think he's feeling pretty confident. I think his game's in a really good place. I'm willing to go back to Nick Dunlap.
Don't forget, he won last year, and then he has also won again since then. So he's going to be returning here for the first time as a professional. He's sitting here at $8,500. Okay. I think JJ Spawn's kind of interesting. I don't like what I saw on the final 9 from JJ to not even get into a playoff. But Greg, he has been one of the best approach players on the PGA Tour for a pretty consistent run over the last couple of months. I don't know what the effects of last week will be, but I think that enough people will view last week as a negative when I obviously view it as a huge positive.
Yeah, I think it is a positive. My one concern would be the golf course. He's played here 6 times. He's missed the cut 3, and his best finish is a tied 25th. It's hard to ignore his ball striking. It really has been spectacular. But I worry about the course history a little bit.
Is there anybody else down that bottom of the 8K range that you would prefer?
Yeah, I think Eric Cole is a great option. I love what he always does with his approach play and putting, and he is just a birdie maker. And I think you put him on a golf course like this is like back to the mini tours. It's a sprint for 4 days on a bunch of different golf courses. This seems like a perfect setup for Eric Cole.
So this is what I think is the perfect like approach plus putting week. So there's like 2 stats that either are official PGA Tour stats or that get calculated in our community. So it's like opportunities or opportunities plus, which are how many times you have birdie looks inside of 15 or 10 feet. And then bonus putting. Do you make all your putts? How many putts do you make inside of 5 feet? And then how many putts do you make outside of 20? And that's like Eric Cole. And that for this week is like pile up opportunities and make more bonuses than your peers. You can look at his stats. I mean, last week, nearly 6 strokes on approach, another 5 with the putter, lost in the other 2 categories. That's okay. And this 5th place finish last week was oddly quiet because we had, Jaeger and Spawn falling out of it. We had Echavarria and Nick Taylor getting into it. And basically that entire time, Eric Cole was just like the man in 5th. And it was great, but it never ever, there's not a moment that he was going to win that golf tournament.
No. And it was in part because he made some early bogeys. And that final round really could have been and probably should have been a whole lot better than it was. He got off to a tough start. That happens, and it could happen again, but I bet you he was still pretty valuable to have in your fantasy lineup last week. So
I have the answer to that I've been saving that I'm going to get to in a little bit.
Okay. All right.
Professional tease.
I think Brian Harmon is a good choice this week. Rare thing. You probably don't like it. Tied 21st last week.
I just don't know anymore. I'm so lost. My head has been spun. He finished dead last at the Century, and then he was like 2 shots out of the lead on Sunday, and then he kind of coughed the whole thing up and had a very big... Like, T21 is not nearly indicative of how well he played last week. Literally right after finishing dead last, I have no idea.
Yes, but I think the Century is a bad golf course for him. I don't think it's a great spot for him.
It's been good here.
He's been good here. And that's another piece of the puzzle. We saw great golf from him last week. And you look at his record here, and he's got 2 tied thirds. He's got a tied 8th, tied 11th, some really good performances. I tend to, this would be like my risky play in the 8K range. And it's Brian Harmon. So you feel like you want to play him when it's safe, but I think it's worth taking a chance on him this week.
$8,200, as Greg mentioned, coming off of a much better week last week, and that T21, as I said, doesn't tell the whole story. We are going to continue to the 7K range and the 6K range. Plus, I will come full circle on that tease that I just provided to Greg after a quick word from our partners. And we're back. And Greg, I've got breaking news. The breaking news is that we were right, and we get to pat ourselves on the back. You said something about when we look back at this next week, and it clicked in my head that I needed to show you this. It's actually a preview. I've not sent this out yet. This is from my newsletter this week, rickrungood.com/newsletter. This is the best lineup that you could have created last week. It was Nick Taylor, Nico Echavarria, Eric Cole, as you mentioned, JJ Spawn, Steven Yeager, and Adam Schenk. We spent, I'm going to hurt myself patting us on the back here. We spent like hours saying you could make entire lineups out of the 7K range last week. That 7K range is so strong. These guys are, I can't stop. We named like 30 guys there. We're like, just make lineups in the 7K range. Well, literally, all but one of those guys, Adam Schenk, was 6,800. The others were between 7,500 and 7,100 for the best possible lineup you could have made. Would have cost $43,300 last week.
Yeah, have you ever seen this where there's not one player above 7,000?
This is very, very low. I even when it's like 45,000, I'm like, wow, that's low. And you're right. Sometimes it'll be like Scotty and the Zits, right? Scotty and 5-6K guys or something. To have it this low and nobody above 7,500, I'd have to go back and look. Incredibly rare. Yes, and
it's like everything that we just talked about. Fade them all. Imagine saying that last week. Going down the fade, nope, fade. It'd be crazy. So I guess now we're getting into the honey hole again here with the 7K and 6K. This is where lineups are built.
Yeah, I don't know if they're as good as it was last week, but we can try here. So let's get to the 7K range. There are still a lot of them. There are 42 golfers in this 7K range. The top names like Jason Day, Nico Echavarria, fresh off his runner-up finish, and Ben Griffin. The middle of this range, that gets you Daniel Berger. Kevin Yu. Haven't talked about Kevin Yu in some time. Ricky Fowler is here at 7,500. And then the bottom of this range, Adam Svensson, Chris Kirk, Rico Hoey, a handful of others. So lots of guys here again. Great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pretty good options, I think. It's not as good as last week, but Some kind of sneaky ones. First, Nico Echavarria, not sneaky. You can go back to the well on him. I think he's too cheap at 7,900.
Agreed.
This is a totally different player, like we talked about last night. So I don't think we need to dive too much into it, but he has been across the board phenomenal, and I don't see any reason to go away from him now.
Yeah, we are like 3 months into this, and it's a win, a couple of runner-up finishes, lots of really strong play. We've talked. If you have missed out on Nico at this point, it is not our fault.
That's right. So yes, you can play him at 7,800. I think there's actually two plays that I really like. One of them may surprise you, Rick, because he's coming off a tied 40th at the Century and a missed cut last week, and it's JT Poston. Now, last week's missed cut was not. He missed by one. Not a huge deal, not terrible play. But these golf courses set up so perfectly for him. And where did he win earlier this fall?
Oh, I know that. Shriners.
Yeah, you've mentioned that a couple of times. Birdie Fest in the desert, one of the best wedge players in this field, year in and year out. But even last year, he was 20th on the PGA Tour from 50 to 125. Really strong in that regard. I think it's a great setup for him. And I know that the form doesn't look great. Maybe some people stay away. I'm going back to him.
I'll tell you what, though, he is he just kind of clicks. The form wasn't really all that good before the win either. It was miscut, 33rd, 33rd. And the last two of those were smaller fields. So he lost strokes to the field in 5 straight before he just snapped off in 1. So I do think that you need to consider that. He does not usually, or doesn't always have to foreshadow when the good results are coming.
No. And I also don't think they're all that bad. I don't think they're as bad as it looks. You think, well, after the win, he came and tied 5th at the RSM, then takes some time off, and it's at tied 40th at the Century. I wouldn't consider that a great golf course for him. And a miscut by one shot at the Sony. A shot here, a shot there. He could be in contention last week. So I don't think it's indicative of a terrible performance.
What else you got? What else you like here?
Oh, I mentioned 2 in the 7,800 range. I think Tom Hoagie's starting to show some signs of good play. Struggling off the tee a little bit, but his iron play is just so good. You think about what we talked about with Eric Cole. Tom Hoagie does that too. He is the best player in this field from 50 to 125. His iron play is stellar. You saw him play some pretty good rounds at the Sony and some not so good rounds. Ends up being a tied 45th. I think Tom Hoagie is still a very playable option this week.
Yeah, he is coming in off a T8 at the Century, T45 at the Sony. Got off to a really hot start and then kind of faded a little bit. And then you see his results over the last 4 or 5 years at the American Express have been a lot better. Runner up here in 2022, T6 in 2020, T17 last year are his best finishes. As we continue down, Greg, there's guys like Daniel Berger, who I was very excited about last week. He ends up missing a cut. We're injecting Ricky Fowler back into this field. I mentioned we haven't spoken about Kevin Yu in some time. What's the middle of this 7K range look like to you?
If you consider 7,600
Sure.
the middle of this range, Sepp Straka is, I think, way underpriced. In his last 6 events, he's gained significant strokes on approach. It looks like his golf swing is back to that really simple game that Sepp Straka likes to play. His short game's been hurting him a little bit. That's been his big downfall and why you're not seeing the results and probably why you're seeing his price where it is. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a factor this week. Again, you mentioned the easier hole locations. The limited rough around the greens. I think Seppi will be fine. I think he's closer to having a really good week than he is falling off. So I love Sepp Straka at 7,600.
His 3 rounds minus Saturday at the Sony were really, really good. And he was leading the field in strokes gained approach at the halfway point. I think we talked about that on Friday night, and just Saturday got away from him, but it was nice to see him bounce back with a very good Sunday to at least improve his positioning, though it still ended up being a tie for 30th. So I'm with you there on Sep.
Now there's so many players here, and I do think there are some other options, but the next one that I would go down to is going back to Joe Highsmith at 7,000 flat.
Okay, I had him noted to ask you about, because this is the first time in the last couple of months where he's really let us down. It was a pretty ugly miscut at the Sony, but you're willing to forgive quickly.
Yeah, I'm willing to forgive. I think you see him and come back to. I think you see him come back to life. I think his ball striking has been really good for a long time. I mean, really since like August of last year, it's been really strong. The putter has moved in the right direction. It wasn't a bad putting week last week either. I'm confident in his game as a whole, and I think last week is more shaking a little rust off than anything else. So I'm going back to Joe Highsmith. I'll
give you two guys that are probably not on a lot of radars here. So Jesper Svensson is I believe one of the 10 from the DP World Tour, played at the Sony last week, did not strike it well, which I'm concerned about, but he still finished T10. I like his DP World Tour numbers. And then Jackson Suber is down here, and he has just flushed it at Waialae and putted the lights out. So it's one week. His Korn Ferry year was pretty good, but that approach plus putting has me amped. So I'm keeping close tabs on those two, because I think they're going to be very, very low on.
I like them. Jackson Suber especially tied 6th in her first PGA Tour event.
Yeah,
at least of the season. You just get your card. You're feeling really confident heading into the next week. So I think that's a good play. And I like the Korn Ferry Tour guys this week. This has some, you've played a lot of tournaments like this if you played a full season on the Korn Ferry Tour the year before.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's roll on. The 6K range here. This is the cheapest price range. So we're going to see if we can find a little bit of value. There are, 91 golfers in this range. I'm going to read every single one. No, just kidding. Adam Schenk, Matt Kuchar, Matt McCarty amongst those at $6,900. $6,500 is Lipsky, Ben Martin, Chris Goddard, Luke List, also Matteo Manacero, who just played in that DP World Tour, that team event from last week. And then the min price golfers, Peter Malnati, who played in the Century this year, is min priced. Kevin Kisner, who is like a part-time professional, is min priced. Jason Duffner's in this field. Look at these guys, Greg.
Yeah, it's something else. It's something else. Look, I think last week the options in the 6K range were a little better than this week. I got some names written down here. I don't feel great about them, but what worries me is you mentioned 91 players. Yeah. So I always struggle with this. There's so much of the field down here. Someone's going to turn up and play pretty well. We just got to figure out who it is. And that feels like guessing. So these are going to be some educated guesses on my part. And it starts with at 6,800, Antoine Rosner, coming off the DP World Tour, and has hit it really well on the DP World Tour since really all of September. He played all fall and he hit it great. And he really, you could even say he hit it great all the way back to June of last year. His approach numbers were phenomenal. Some struggles with the short game, but I don't think that's too big of an issue this week. And it seemed like in November, his putter kind of took a nice little turn for the better. Yeah. So I'm interested in Rosner at 6,800.
He also, during that stretch, that 3 tournament stretch where we had the strokes gain metrics for it, and he gained strokes putting, it was 4th in Korea. That was the Korea Championship. That was the event Benny on won, and I think Tom Kim finished second, right?
Lost in playoff. Yeah.
Yep. Abu Dhabi, which is that gets a decent field. He finished T6 there. And then DP World Tour Championship, that's the final 50. That's the event Rory won. T3 there. So yes, he played a lot better at the stretch there. He's played twice since then, but one was a team event, and now he's coming over to the States for the first time.
So I'm pretty excited about that. Next on my list, I'm trying to find him. I have Paul Peterson.
Oh, I just scrolled past his name. Right here, 6,600.
Oh, he's at 66. Okay. Yeah, there he is. All right. So Paul Peterson played great golf last week. He finished tied 10th. He also played in the RSM Classic in the fall, finished tied 25th. I'm very happy with those results. And I like the way that he's done it too. He's putted well. His iron play has been really sharp. I think he is looking like a really solid player. And at 6,600, I'm willing to roll the dice that he performs well again.
So I don't know if you remember this, but we talked about him at the RSM Classic because he's wearing a Sea Island hat. And we were like, oh yeah, like he's probably got some local knowledge or whatever. Well, finished T25, and I thought that might have just been a one-off because it's a place that he was familiar with. Well, color me surprised when he finished T10 at the Sony Open last week. So this dude might be a player. We don't have a lot of information on him. He won on the Korn Ferry Tour in September, seems to be quite talented, and I don't think that price is high enough.
I don't either. So especially when you consider some of these other guys that are around him that you're guessing at, it's hard to find a metric that makes you want to play them. So next I got two more guys that are potential here. One is Wesley Bryant. I'm not crazy about this, but basically Wesley Bryant rated out pretty well in the wedge category.
Yeah.
And the other aspect to this, we know he's not a long hitter, but he's been driving the ball really well since the Wyndham Championship last year. He had a really strong fall, and he missed the cut at the RSM, but still drove it pretty well. If you could combine an accurate driving week from Wesley Bryant with the wedge play that he possesses, there's a chance that he fills it up with birdies.
I'm sorry, Greg. He also missed the cut at the RSM, but he got like course rotation. He actually gained strokes to the field, just was on the wrong side of it.
So yeah, that tells you it's pretty darn close.
Correct.
And he's 6,600. So I'm not overly concerned, and I think there's a little bit of upside. I hardly ever click his name, but I think his form is hard to ignore coming from the fall. All right.
One more for me?
Yeah, I got one more. Last but not least, he's at 6,300, and it's Ben Coles. Now, Ben Coles is very clearly on team no putt, but he is really striping it. He's been striping it for a while, but the putter has just gotten bad. Now, there were some stretches where it's been pretty good. It was pretty good at the, pretty good in the summertime. Like PGA Championship to 3M Open, he was putting well and putting together some good finishes. But I'm wondering if his ball striking is going to give him a high enough ceiling to make a cut. Because in that stretch, he has made a lot of cuts. He's only missed 3 cuts since the U.S. Open in June, and he's played a lot of tournaments. So maybe we get a made cut out of him. Maybe we get that miracle week where he putts well, and all of a sudden, you got a surprising story in Ben Coles near the top of the leaderboard.
Oh man, for a guy who has like one top 40 in the last 6 months, I sure do click his name a lot.
Yeah, well, it's second at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson, right? Still hanging on to that. That was all the way back, right after the Masters.
Yeah, oh yeah. It feels like yesterday.
You just can't ignore that ball striking.
I know. I don't. Trust me, I don't.
Yeah.
I actually do have more breaking news, and this is real breaking news. Denny McCarthy just withdrew.
Okay.
We didn't talk about him, but Denny just withdrew Aaron Baddeley in as the alternate. So what I imagine is going to happen when DraftKings loads up tomorrow with like the Monday qualifiers. Are there Monday? There's Monday queues for this, right? It's got to be.
Oh, I believe there is.
I think there is too,
but I don't know. I guess all those changes are taking place next year.
Yeah,
where there might not be.
So hard to keep track of. But what I'm sure they'll do is they'll get like Baddeley in the field tomorrow. They'll get Phillip Knowles in the field tomorrow, stuff like that. So keep an eye out. I mean, maybe there are more. I don't know, like if Nick Taylor makes it to this event, but a couple guys WDing here on Monday. Just wanted to make sure we got that in because that did happen while we were on air today.
Yeah, something you want to pay attention to for sure. So just check your lineup before Thursday's round starts and make sure you're good. I think we gave you plenty of names. You'll have plenty of pivot options if somebody does withdraw.
Josh is telling me there is not a Monday qualifier this week.
Oh, no Monday qualifier.
Yes, the only one this month, according to Ryan French at Monday Q Info, is the Farmers.
Okay, so you're basically trying to get I don't know. Maybe it's daylight. Maybe it's the pro-am tee times. You want to get all those lined up. I don't know.
This is well above our pay grade, how they decide all that.
Yes.
Tuesday's show. Greg just gave me the look like, well, I could do it. He's just like, it's not that hard. I was
thinking that. I would put a Monday qualifier in.
I know.
Always.
I saw the look on your face. We will be back Tuesday. That's your mega preview. Friday, which will actually not be the cut. And then Sunday, because things are wacky. And we'll be here for all the wackiness. Big thanks. Producer Josh, he does all the hard work behind the scenes. Greg DuCharme is available at The Real GFD. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.